January 11, 1944. 27,000 feet above central Germany, east of the Rhine. The sound comes first, a distant, steady thunder, not from weather but from engines. Oberleutnant Karl-Heinz Weber of Jagdgeschwader 3 presses his oxygen mask tighter against his face and scans the pale winter sky. The cockpit of his Messerschmitt Bf 109G vibrates faintly beneath him, the Daimler-Benz engine humming like a caged animal. Somewhere ahead, beyond the thin veil of cloud, the Americans are coming. For 3 years, this moment has always followed a familiar pattern. Radar stations pick up the bombers. Controllers vector the fighters. Interceptors climb hard, punch through escort screens near the German border, and tear into the heavy bombers before they reach their targets. Losses are expected, painful but manageable. Germany's skies, even under attack, have remained contested. But today feels different. Weber squints into the sun and sees them. Long, silver streams of B-17 flying fortresses, box formations stacked like floating cities. Vapor trails carve white scars across the sky. He reaches for the radio, expecting the usual warning about escort fighters turning back somewhere near the Ruhr. Instead, the voice crackles with disbelief. Stung enemy fighters still with the bombers, multiple groups heading east. Repeat, fighters are not turning back. Weber's jaw tightens. East means Berlin. Below, far beneath the contrails, the German winter lies frozen and gray. Rail yards, factories, airfields, the industrial skeleton of the Reich, stretch unbroken toward the capital. The Luftwaffe has promised these places protection. Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring himself has assured Hitler that no enemy bomber would ever reach Berlin in daylight. Yet now, at altitude, Weber can see the dark specks moving with the bombers, sleek, long-winged fighters holding station with quiet confidence. P-51 Mustangs. Not the short-legged Thunderbolts or Spitfires that once peeled away at the edge of Germany, forced home by empty tanks. These fighters stay close, weaving gently, their pilots relaxed, disciplined, watching Weber. As the German fighters push forward, the Americans do not scatter. They come straight at them. The first pass is chaos. Sunlight flashes off aluminum wings, tracers rip through the air, engines scream. Weber fires a short burst at a Mustang crossing his nose, sees no effect, and then another is there, guns already walking toward him. He brakes hard, pulling G's until his vision grays. The radio dissolves into shouting, call signs overlapping, panic breaking through training. This is not how it is supposed to go. Far below, near Berlin, General der Jagdflieger Adolf Galland stands in the operations room, hands clasped behind his back, cigar unlit between his fingers. The walls are crowded with maps, colored pins marking bomber streams, fighter groups, flak belts. Clerks move nervously from table to table. Telephones ring without pause. Galland has seen bomber raids before. Hundreds of them. But today, the situation report refuses to stabilize. Enemy escorts still present over Magdeburg. Fighter cover detected past Leipzig. Multiple escort groups approaching Berlin airspace. Galland exhales slowly through his nose. For months, he has warned Berlin that this moment would come. American production is overwhelming. Pilot training is accelerating. And worst of all, the Americans have solved the range problem. Drop tanks. Improved navigation. Aggressive escort doctrine. The U.S. 8th Air Force is no longer just bombing Germany, it is dismantling the Luftwaffe in the air. Outside, the anti-aircraft batteries begin to fire. The dull, rhythmic thump of heavy flak rolls across the city, like distant artillery. Berliners pause in the streets, looking upward, searching for the familiar sound of engines, expecting, perhaps, the reassurance of German fighters climbing to meet the enemy. But above the clouds, the battle is already slipping away. Back over central Germany, Weber regroups with what remains of his Staffel. 2 aircraft are missing. One pilot bailed out, another simply vanished into the cloud layers below. The bombers continue onward, formation still tight, bombs still aboard. And the Mustangs are still there. They circle patiently, not chasing kills recklessly, but positioning themselves between the German fighters and the bombers, a living shield. Every attempt to climb is punished. Every dive is countered. The Americans are not merely escorting today, they are hunting. Weber realizes, with a chill deeper than the cold at altitude, that the old calculations no longer apply. Fuel, ammunition, time. The Americans have more of all three. When the recall finally comes, it sounds less like an order and more like an admission. Disengage, preserve aircraft. Weber turns west, the bombers still visible behind him, contrails stretching all the way to the heart of the Reich. Somewhere ahead, Berlin is about to be hit, in daylight, under the eyes of the world. For the first time since the war began, a terrible thought settles in among Germany's fighter pilots and commanders alike. The Luftwaffe may no longer be able to stop this. January 11, 1944. Berlin airspace. The bombers arrive just after midday. From the Tiergarten to the Spree, Berlin's flak batteries open fire in disciplined waves. The sky fills with black bursts, each one a timed explosion calculated to shred aluminum and flesh alike. The sound is physical, a deep, concussive pounding that echoes between government buildings and apartment blocks. Civilians scatter into shelters, clutching coats and children, eyes wide with a terror they had been assured they would never feel in daylight. High above them, the B-17s fly on. Bomb bay doors yawn open. A ripple passes through the formations. Thousands of pounds of explosives fall toward rail yards, aircraft factories, and administrative districts. The Luftwaffe's fighters, few and scattered now, slash ineffectually at the edges before being driven off by escorts that refuse to leave. For the first time, Berlin is bombed under a blue sky, and everyone knows it. That evening, in a smoke-heavy room at the Air Ministry, Hermann Göring sits slumped in his chair, his once pristine uniform strained by weight and exhaustion. Reports are stacked on the table before him. Losses, sortie counts, fuel expenditure, pilot casualties. The numbers are unforgiving. Adolf Galland stands across from him, jaw clenched, voice controlled but sharp. He has spent years shielding the fighter arm from political fantasy, and now the fantasy has collapsed. Our losses today were disproportionate, Galland says. Not to bombers, to fighters. Göring waves a hand dismissively, though his eyes flicker. The flak will do its work, it always has. Galland shakes his head. Flak alone cannot stop daylight bombing. We knew that in 1940 fighters must break up the formations before the targets. And now? He pauses, choosing his words carefully. Now the Americans deny us access to the bombers. Göring bristles. Are you suggesting the Luftwaffe cannot defend the Reich? Galland does not answer immediately. When he does, his voice is quiet. I am saying the Americans have changed the rules. The silence that follows is thick and dangerous. Göring has staked his reputation, his power, on the promise that German air defenses were impregnable. Hitler has repeated it in speeches. Newspapers have printed it in bold type. And now it has been publicly disproven. Across Western Germany, airfields are littered with damaged aircraft. Ground crews work through the night, hands numb from cold and fatigue, patching bullet holes, replacing engines, stripping wrecks for usable parts. The pilots who return do not brag. They sit alone, smoking silently, staring at walls. Hauptmann Erich Buby Hartmann, not yet the legend he will become, listens as older pilots talk in low voices. They speak of Mustangs appearing out of the sun, of escorts staying with the bombers all the way in and all the way out, of being hunted, not the hunters. One pilot says it plainly, we are flying into a trap now. By February 1944, the pattern is unmistakable. The Americans come day after day, sometimes in clear skies, sometimes through cloud, sometimes escorted by hundreds of fighters. ball-bearing plants at Schweinfurt, aircraft factories at Regensburg, oil targets deep in the Reich. Each raid forces the Luftwaffe to rise, and each time the fighter force is ground down a little more. The Americans are no longer focused on targets alone. They actively seek combat. Mustangs dive on climbing German fighters before they can form up. Thunderbolts strafe airfields. Lightnings lurk near known intercept points. The sky becomes hostile territory for the defenders. Inside Luftwaffe headquarters, the language of reports changes. Where once commanders spoke of interception and defensive success, they now speak of disengagements and preservation of assets. Fuel shortages worsen. Training hours shrink. Replacement pilots arrive with fewer than half the flight time their predecessors once had. Galland submits memorandum after memorandum, urging concentration on fighter production, improved pilot training, and the introduction of the Me-262 jet, not as a bomber but as a pure interceptor. Each recommendation collides with politics. Hitler wants revenge weapons. Goering wants assurances. Neither wants to admit that air superiority is slipping away. One cold morning, Galland stands at an airfield watching a Staffel take off. The Bf-109s climb slowly, heavily laden, engines straining. He counts them silently. Not enough. When the raid ends, fewer return. Galland turns away, knowing the truth with a clarity that borders on despair. The Luftwaffe is no longer bleeding the enemy. It is bleeding itself. And somewhere across the channel, American planners are watching the same statistics with growing confidence. Bomber losses fall. Escort losses stabilize. German fighter numbers decline. Daylight bombing, once a gamble, is becoming routine. For Germany's air commanders, the realization is no longer theoretical. It is operational. It is mathematical. The Luftwaffe cannot stop this. February 20th, 1944. Operation Argument, later known to the Germans as Black Week. Before dawn, the airfields of eastern England come alive. Floodlights cut through mist. Engines cough, then roar. Ground crews pull chocks, slap fuselages, and step back as bombers begin their slow, heavy roll down frozen runways. To the men climbing into the cockpits, this feels different, not just another raid but a sustained offensive. Across the channel, German radar operators detect the first echoes just after sunrise. They come in waves. Not one day, not two, but 6 days of relentless daylight bombing aimed not at cities, but at the Luftwaffe itself, aircraft factories, component plants, airfields, and the fighter force in the air. Inside his command post, Adolf Galland watches the plotting tables fill until there is barely room left for pins. Bomber streams from multiple directions. Escort fighters everywhere. "This is it," he mutters. "They are coming for us." German fighters scramble again and again, sometimes 3 or 4 times in a single day. Pilots land, refuel, rearm, and take off before engines cool. There is no time to analyze mistakes. Only time to climb. Hauptmann Weber, older now, lines carved deeper into his face, pushes his Bf-109 into a steep ascent, watching the altimeter crawl upward. Above him, contrails crisscross like chalk lines on a blackboard. The radio is already alive with warnings. Mustangs high at 12 o'clock. Thunderbolts below climbing fast. Bombers splitting formations. Weber spots the Mustangs first. They are everywhere, not clustered defensively but spread out, controlling altitude dictating the fight. The Germans try their old tactics, head-on passes, rocket attacks, concentrated dives. Some bombers fall, flaming wrecks spiraling downward. But the cost is ruinous. The escorts pounce the moment German fighters break formation. They follow them down, machine guns hammering. There is no safe disengagement anymore. The sky has no edges. By the end of the day, Weber's unit has lost 5 aircraft. 2 pilots are dead. 1 is missing. Another lands with half a wing gone and collapses on the runway, shaking uncontrollably. Tomorrow they will do it again. In Berlin, Goering demands results. How many bombers destroyed today? When the answer comes, it is not enough. And our losses? The room grows quiet. Someone clears his throat. Unacceptable, Herr Reichsmarschall. Goering slams his fist onto the table. Then fly harder, be more aggressive. Galland steps forward, unable to hold back. Aggression is not the problem, he says. We are outnumbered, outranged, and outproduced. They choose when and where to fight. We react. Goering glares at him. Are you questioning my leadership? Galland meets his eyes. I am questioning reality. The words hang in the air like a challenge. Everyone in the room knows Galland is right, and that saying so is dangerous. On February 24th, American bombers strike aircraft production facilities deep inside Germany. Augsburg, Regensburg, Schweinfurt again. The escorts range freely, attacking anything with a Balkan cruise. At one airfield, P-51 strafe parked fighters, exploding fuel trucks and shredding hangars. Mechanics dive for cover as bullets tear through canvas and steel. Aircraft burn without ever leaving the ground. The Luftwaffe's losses during Black Week are catastrophic. Hundreds of fighters destroyed, dozens of experienced pilots killed or wounded. The Americans lose bombers too, but their factories are already replacing them. German factories are not. That night, Galland sits alone in his quarters, a single lamp illuminating stacks of after-action reports. He does the arithmetic again and again, hoping the numbers will change. They do not. Each experienced pilot lost represents years of training. Each destroyed aircraft represents materials Germany can no longer easily replace. Fuel shortages are tightening. New pilots arrive with barely enough hours to land safely, let alone fight Mustangs over Berlin. For the first time, Galland allows himself to think the unthinkable. Air superiority is no longer contested. It is being decided. And Germany is losing. By the end of Operation Argument, the American conclusion is clear. The Luftwaffe has been forced into battle and broken in the process. Daylight bombing will continue. There will be no pause, no reprieve, only escalation. March 1944. Central Germany. The raids no longer feel like battles. They feel like weather. Bomber streams arrive with such regularity that Luftwaffe controllers stop asking if there will be an attack and begin asking where. The sky over the Reich fills with contrails almost daily, long white scars that drift and spread until they blur into a pale haze. Hauptmann Karl-Heinz Weber climbs again, but the climb feels slower now. His aircraft is heavier, his fuel load rationed, his engine less forgiving. Below him, the ground recedes, but not fast enough. Above him, the Americans are already there. This time, there is no mass interception. No coordinated punch. Only scattered German fighters, arriving in dribs and drabs, climbing into a sky owned by the escorts. The Mustangs do not wait. They dive as soon as Weber's Staffel crests through the cloud layer. The attack is clean, professional. Short bursts. Immediate breakaways. The Americans are not chasing glory. They are enforcing control. Weber rolls hard, dodging tracer fire that slices past his canopy. He sees one of his wingmen explode without warning, the aircraft tearing apart in midair. There is no time to register the pilot's name. The bombers pass untouched. In the Reich Air Ministry, the tone of briefings has changed completely. There is no talk now of stopping the raids, only of mitigating damage. Flak belts are repositioned. Night fighters are prioritized. Day fighters are increasingly held back to protect specific targets, oil refineries, synthetic fuel plants, transportation hubs. Even then, they are insufficient. Galland argues again for the Me-262 as a fighter. He demonstrates its speed advantage. He outlines interception profiles that could, In theory, shred bomber formations. Hitler listens, and then insists it be used as a bomber. Galland leaves the meeting furious, his faith in leadership nearly gone. The solution exists, but it is being strangled by politics and delusion. At the airfields, the human cost becomes impossible to hide. New pilots arrive barely out of flight school. They struggle to maintain formation. They overshoot landings. They freeze in combat. Veterans try to teach them in minutes what once took months. Don't chase, Weber tells a young lieutenant whose hands tremble on the controls. They want you to chase. The next day, the lieutenant does not return. Weber stops asking names. By April, American bombers range almost unopposed over parts of Germany. Escorts fly ahead of the bomber streams behind them and off to the flanks, a moving umbrella of steel. Factories burn. Rail lines twist and buckle. Oil production collapses. The Luftwaffe still fights, bravely, stubbornly, but it fights blind and exhausted. And in the American command rooms, a quiet confidence takes hold. General Jimmy Doolittle has changed escort doctrine. Fighters are no longer chained to bombers. They are unleashed. First priority, he tells his pilots, is to destroy the German Air Force. They do exactly that. On April 25, 1944, another raid passes over Berlin. The flak fires. A few fighters climb. The bombers fly on. Galland stands at a window as distant explosions ripple across the city. He does not flinch. The realization he reached months ago is now shared by everyone who understands air war. Daylight bombing cannot be stopped. The Luftwaffe has lost control of the sky, and with it, Germany's ability to protect itself from what is coming next. From above, the Reich is exposed. June 6, 1944. Normandy coast, northern France. At dawn, the sky over the channel fills with aircraft, not hundreds but thousands. Transport planes, gliders, bombers, fighters. The sound is continuous, a vast mechanical roar that drowns out even the sea. For the Luftwaffe, this is the final proof. German radar stations detect the armada early, but there is nothing to be done. Fighter units scramble what they can, a handful of aircraft here, a scattered staffel there, but the response is pitiful compared to the scale of what is unfolding. Adolf Galland listens to the reports in stunned silence. Allied air superiority is absolute. The escort fighters range freely, not merely protecting bombers, but sealing off the battlefield. German aircraft that attempt to approach the invasion beaches are intercepted almost immediately. Many are shot down before they ever see the coast. The Luftwaffe, once the spearhead of Blitzkrieg, is now a spectator to history. Days later, Galland meets Göring for what feels like the last honest conversation they will ever have. The enemy controls the air, Galland says flatly. Everywhere that matters. Göring looks older now. Smaller. The bombastic confidence is gone, replaced by bitterness. If only we had had the jets earlier, he mutters. Galland does not respond. He knows earlier would not have mattered, not without trained pilots, fuel, and freedom from political interference. By this point, the Americans are bombing Germany at will. Oil plants are priority targets now, and their destruction cripples what remains of the Luftwaffe. Fighters sit idle for lack of fuel. Pilots wait beside aircraft that cannot fly. The sky empties of German contrails. Hauptmann Weber flies his last combat mission that summer. His aircraft is damaged on landing, and there are no spare parts to repair it. He is reassigned to ground duty, an unspoken admission that there will be no replacement. He watches Allied formations pass overhead, unchallenged, and feels something break inside him. Once, he had believed the sky could be defended. Now, he understands it never belonged to Germany at all. It only felt that way while the enemy was still learning. By late 1944, daylight bombing has become relentless. Precision strikes dismantle what remains of Germany's industry and transportation. Cities burn. Railways collapse. Armies at the front starve for fuel and ammunition. The Luftwaffe still exists on paper. In reality, it is finished. German officers no longer speak of stopping the bombers. They speak of endurance, of survival, of how long the Reich can hold together under a sky it does not control. The realization that began quietly in early 1944 has now become undeniable truth. Air superiority has decided the war. The Americans did not need to defeat Germany's armies in the sky, only to make sure they could never fight back. And once that happened, everything else followed.